everybody. Welcome to Fresh Outlook, the show where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm your host, Taryn Brill, but just call me TWB. On today's show, we'll be tackling three timely topics. First up, that looming fiscal cliff. Watch out. As the President and the Speaker of the House try to come up with a solution, are we in for a grand bargain or a grand betrayal? Then we'll turn the conversation to Obamacare. It's here to stay, so we'll get into the realities of what it all means and the plan's options. Finally, we'll discuss new forms of charity, some good and some not so good. We'll delve into something called the Rolling Jubilee. Here's a hint, it has nothing to do with the Queen of England. Then we'll change gears and discuss the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, specifically scams and scam artists trying to cash in the wake of the storm. Beware, we're going to tell you what the IRS warned you to look out for. But before we get the conversation started, let's of course meet our all-star panel. Welcome, guys. Let's start with WJ. Who are you, where are you from, and why are you here?
I'm WJ O'Reilly. I'm a partner with Harvard College's Center for Public Interest Careers.
And our guest panelist today, Dr. Bill Rodgers. Welcome.
Thank you. Great for having me. Bill Rodgers. I'm a professor of public policy at Rutgers University in New Brunswick and a resident of Montgomery Township in central New Jersey.
Terrific. Welcome, welcome. Good to have you here. And finally, Francesca, FM on the dial.
That's right, your radio dial. I'm Francesca Maxime. I'm a news anchor here at Ebru TV and the author of Rooted, a Verse Memoir.
Great. We're excited to get into it with you guys in just a moment. But first, as we get closer to the end of the year, we get closer to falling off of that proverbial fiscal cliff. With the clock ticking on impending spending cuts and tax hikes, the question remains, is Obama setting us up for a grand bargain or a grand betrayal? Take a look.
With the 2012 election over with, newly re-elected President Barack Obama is already facing the first big challenge of his second term.
I think we both understand that trying to find a way to avert the fiscal cliff is important for our country.
The fiscal cliff represents the moment in January 2013 when tax cuts from the Bush era expire and automatic cuts to defense and social programs will take effect. In an effort to compromise with Republicans, Democrats have offered to slash trillions in spending, much of it hitting the elderly, the poor, and the middle class.
Now, I'm open to compromise and new ideas, but I refuse to accept any approach that isn't balanced.
The details and the eventual fate of this grand bargain are still uncertain, but some reduction in the country's already shrinking safety net seems likely. Voices on the left are calling it a grand betrayal, as it may leave much of America's most vulnerable out in the cold.
The American people voted for action, not politics as usual.
Meanwhile, Americans across the spectrum wonder what any mix of austerity and higher taxes will mean, both for the nation and for their own prosperity.
All right, lots to talk about. Are we in for a grand, you're laughing.
It's not so funny.
What's so funny? Are we in for a grand betrayal or a grand bargain? I mean, there was just leaked
I think we're in for grand hyperbole.
Okay, explain.
The politicization of this issue, the emotionalization of issues that affect the safety net in this country, it's hard to really cut through and find out what the truth is. I'm not sure I know what it is.
Well, I mean, is it gonna get to the 11th hour, they're gonna put a Band-Aid on it, or are we heading off the cliff? And is that such a bad thing? Bill, what do you think?
Well, I think my sense is, we were going to go off, not necessarily the cliff, but members of Congress, the president. Yes, status quo looks very similar, right? Mm-hmm. Re-election, House still in Republican hands, the Senate, right, is still in Democratic hands, but these are real constraints. I mean, if on January 1st, from a standpoint of a household, you're looking at a several $1,000s tax increase. Mm-hmm. And we've had 32 months of consecutive job creation, but we still have an unemployment rate that's it's almost 8%. Mm-hmm. The real unemployment rate is almost 14%.
$7,000 tax increase for the average American?
A family about $50,000 a day.
Got it.
You're looking at about $3,000 tax increase.
That is significant.
Okay, but what's the alternative? We head into an even deeper recession? I mean...
Well, I mean, the way I like to think about this, or I've been thinking about this most recently, is we had the stimulus package, which was supposed to be timely, right, temporary, and targeted. About $800 billion, right, put in the economy to save the economy, and it did, and we have a lot of good to show for that. We're talking about potentially pulling back $600 billion out of the economy, right? To where Sherman Bernanke, head of the Federal Reserve, the Congressional Budget Office, they're a nonpartisan set of researchers, economists. They're arguing that we will push ourselves back into a recession.
Right. Well, how do we recover?
Well, I mean, I think it's first of all, it's a combination of proposed tax hikes, the extension of the Bush tax cuts had continued. It was supposed to be killed in 2010. You know, Obama kind of gave into that in order to appease the new Congress, sort of the conservative Tea Party Congress, in exchange for extending unemployment benefits.
Right.
So this is the conflagration of all of that sort of coming together now, coupled with you know, the cutting of programs, social programs. The question is, who is going to be most hurt by this? Who's going to be most at stake? Who has most at stake in this? And if you look at the high echelon earners, the top 40%, it's going to hit 0.1% of their income.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. If you look at the lower 20% of people, it's going to hurt them. It's going to cut out $209, which is a significant amount of their actual income. And so it's going to hurt the people at the bottom the most. I'm not going to say that people who are, you know, high earners over $250,000 a year, who Obama is proposing, we go back to the 39.5% tax rate that we used to have. I'm not saying that they're happy about this proposal.
But their lives aren't, like, as Obama puts it, the wealthy will remain wealthy, even if you give them a little more. Their lives aren't changing drastically.
Yes.
Right. The lower and middle income, like you just said, $209, that's a drastic.
That's a debilitating hit for the lower middle classes.
And you also, right, have not just the folks who are families that are by definition by the federal government in terms of in poverty, you also have a set of families that we've been working on, studying here in New Jersey, called ALICE families. And ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained But Employed. And so these are families actually who have incomes that are above poverty. So they're about $40,000, depending on their family size, up to $70,000. And because of New Jersey's high cost of living, you know, these are families that are a paycheck away from being pushed into poverty. Or
but these are cut above the working poor, or are these considered working
some
poor?
Of them can be working poor.
Because they're only a check away from disaster in some cases.
And so, you know, my big feeling, a problem with this economy, we've had some job creation, but a large part of this problem has been the absence of the consumer really getting back in the game and wanting to really ramp things up. And so this cliff here not only will have these real effects that you're talking about, but will also have just the psychological effects. I mean, that's going to be more really the first part of the cliff that people are going to hit, is that, wow, we had this election, these guys and women can't get to yes.
Right, and the thing is when you're talking about $4 trillion in a proposed grand bargain, perhaps, that, you know, Obama is proposing to Boehner and to those folks that are more on the conservative side of things, that would prefer to keep things as a status quo with the Bush tax cuts, you know, in place. When you're talking about that, who are the people that it's going to affect? Mainly the elderly, mainly those on Social Security, mainly those on, you know, requiring social services. They don't have a lot of other options. They're on fixed incomes. They're already being, you know, pushed aside. So when you look at this in terms of a combination between raising revenue, what I found was, and the tax cuts, what I found was interesting is when Obama and Boehner and Pelosi, everybody was making nice yesterday in their press conferences. They were actually all sort of saying for the first time that there might be some bipartisanship, that we might actually try to get along. The photo ops were not about, no, that's not what our press conference was about. You guys have been talking about all the nasty things about us. And no, they were more coming together in a way that you would hope after, you know, last, 2 weeks ago election, that they might, in order to achieve something here that doesn't hurt more people.
Is it smoke and mirrors, though? I mean,
I think this is real this time.
Yeah, okay.
And you know, one thing I was very happy to see was nothing out of Mitch McConnell, you know, saying, you know, well, he can't say, you know, you're going to be, you know, I'm going to make you a one-term president. But still, you know, what would be the, you know, sort of variant?
The venom seems to be lacking.
But again, we're early in the game.
Right.
You know, and we're early in the game.
But you'd be,
Bill,
but the end of the year is approaching very quickly.
I'm sorry, Bill, would you say that actually the President Obama has the political capital to cut a reasonable deal with this, or is there smoke and mirrors involved in this right now?
I think, you know, the advantage to him is to the president right now, and that people, you know, yes, he won the Electoral College decisively, and so you can take that to some degree as a bit of a mandate. But that his coalition, if you will, that people talked about, he created, you know, these are going to be the largest groups of people who are going to be really adversely affected. And I think there's much, and I think many of these folks realize too, okay, we fell asleep at the wheel last time. We assumed we got him elected, you know, that we can move things through the House, we can move things through the Senate, and now I think that, you know, and he even the president even cautioned, right? He even said, you know, our work is just beginning. And I think now this time, hopefully this coalition of Americans that he's pulled along, that they're not going to step back.
I think we're just going to put a Band-Aid on it again. I mean, that's what we've been doing consecutively now. I mean,
but these are real things that are set to expire. It's not just like a can of food that says, okay, well, after December of 2012, you know, you can still eat those green beans and you're probably not going to die. This is something where, you know,
which I do often.
This is like botulism here. You know, this is going to happen. I mean, 55% of Americans believe that that we are in a system right now, a financial system, a governmental system that favors the wealthy. So there are a lot of people out there who are looking to sort of recalibrate the scales here. And if the bell curve, if you would, weren't so disparate, meaning that top 1% versus, you know, the lower, you know, the official measures of poverty, which I was just asking you, Dr. Rodgers, if you could explain, because it's sort of an antiquated measure, if you will. You know?
Yeah, it's basically, take for an individual, it's around $20,000 a year, and that's been created based upon a set of sort of basic goods. But as you point out, I mean, that there are a lot of researchers, policymakers, my work with United Way as a volunteer, you know, we find that that poverty measure is rather inadequate.
Right. Let me ask you this. Is Social Security dead in America? How do we feel about that?
No, it's not, definitely not
why
dead.
Why not?
Well, one, the Social Security, in terms of the whole issues around the debt and deficit issues, that's not the main driver. The big driver has been that in terms of the growth of the deficit over the last few years was, you know, paying for 2 wars on your credit card, and then also the Bush tax cuts, right? And so it's Social
don't
Security.
forget the bailout of Wall Street.
Exactly.
There's that.
That little thing.
Yeah, and so Social Security, you know, there'll have to be some modifications, but that is not the
But
big
is that
driver.
a grand betrayal?
I'm sorry. The other big driver is Medicare.
Right.
That there will have to be some adjustments to Medicare.
But these adjustments to Medicare, Medicaid, all the social nets, I mean, this is everything that Obama's, you know, campaigned on, and I feel like he's betraying the people that voted him in. I mean, especially with Obamacare about to go into effect, extending Medicare, but now these cuts say, okay, we're pulling back on Medicare, so it seems like a contradiction. I don't understand how this will
compromise
play out.
more than a contradiction.
Yeah, I think it's a compromise. And I go back to what I said earlier. I think he has the advantage now to where, you know, I think the short-term deal you're going to see that will address the Bush tax cuts by the end of the year, that'll address the AMT, that in terms of this adjustment of the alternative minimum, that my sense is those will go in his advantage. Hopefully he'll be able to push Social Security to the side in terms of being able to preserve that.
Right.
Medicare is where I think you're going to see some of the major.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
challenges.
We're out of time on this topic, but I think we should raise the retirement age. That's another.
That's the other one.
We didn't get to. I'll leave you with that, Cliff. We got to go to break. Lots of hot topics to get to. So when we come back, we're going to be tackling another, right? Why not? Up next on the agenda, Obamacare. We'll talk about Obamacare next on Fresh Outlook.